The night inside the small rural hospital felt unnaturally still, as if the quiet itself was holding its breath. The fluorescent lights buzzed softly overhead, filling the emergency room with a pale glow. Then, the automatic doors snapped open with a sharp hiss, shattering the silence. Two nurses rushed in pushing a gurney, and behind them came Amy, moving quickly but holding an unnervingly steady gaze. Her face showed shock, yes, but her eyes remained too focused, too controlled. She just collapsed. My mother-in-law fell without warning. Her voice sounded urgent, yet her breathing stayed calm. Too calm for someone who had supposedly witnessed something terrifying. It felt rehearsed, like a line spoken from memory. Drive. Richard, the ER physician, leaned over Margaret, checking her vitals with swift precision. Check her pressure. Start oxygen, he ordered. The team moved like a well-oiled machine, but Richard's attention soon shifted. A man entered right behind Amy, a man who did not belong to an emergency entrance. Neat suit, ID badge, calm demeanor. I'm from the insurance company, he said. Richard's brow furrowed slightly, and his gaze slid toward Amy. Amy nodded immediately, almost too naturally. I called earlier today about updating her policy. Her tone was smooth, almost flat, and something inside the room tightened. Richard set the chart down, his expression darkening. This doesn't look like a natural fainting, he said quietly, his voice steady, but with a cold edge born from certainty rather than caution. Someone may have induced it. Amy's eyelashes trembled barely. Her lips dipped for the shortest moment before she forced them back into a calm line. She clutched her bag a little tighter. What are you talking about? Richard cut her off. The drop pattern in her blood pressure is irregular. It's not consistent with simple exhaustion. The atmosphere changed instantly. The monitors beeped in uneven pulses. Metal trays reflected harsh red lights. The insurance agent stood silently, observing everything. And Amy stood in the center of it all, too still, too composed. Something was breaking open tonight. A lie built over many years ago, now cracking under the weight of truth. David walked down the hallway, his footsteps uneven, his breathing still unsteady. One hand pressed against his forehead while the other gripped his phone as if it could somehow explain what was happening. Amy, what exactly happened? Why did Mum collapse like that? He stopped and turned to her, hoping for clarity, but Amy kept her eyes lowered. I don't know. I just found her lying there. Her tone didn't sound like someone describing a shocking moment. It sounded like someone choosing every word carefully, hiding something beneath the surface. David waited for her to elaborate, but Amy said nothing more. The silence stretched between them, growing heavier with each second. Truth is, David had carried a small but persistent doubt in his chest for a long time. The strange tension between Amy and Margaret. They were polite enough, but the warmth never seemed to reach either side. He tried to dismiss it as a simple personality mismatch, but the uneasiness never fully disappeared. He finally forced himself to ask, "Did something happen between you and Mom lately?" Amy shook her head immediately. "No, nothing. It's just sometimes your mother makes things difficult for me." Difficult? What does that mean? David stared at her, confused. What exactly did she do? Amy rubbed her fingers together, voice dropping. She stiffens up whenever I walk into the room. She gets tense. I can feel it. Do you know how uncomfortable that is? I can't pretend I don't notice. Her words carried hurt, yes, but also a hint of self-pity, as if she were the only one suffering. David didn't know what to say. He knew his mother could be sensitive, even sharp at times, but she had never hated Amy. He remembered every moment Margaret thanked his wife, telling her she appreciated the help, but Amy had always taken those thanks the wrong way, as though each polite word hid suspicion instead of gratitude. At that moment, a nurse approached. "You'll need to wait in the family lounge for now." David nodded, and Amy followed without protest. They sat side by side in the dim waiting room, yet it felt like miles stretched between them. Even now, Amy looked calm, too calm. It made something twist painfully inside David's chest. He finally whispered, "Amy, you're not hiding something, right?" Amy didn't lift her head. She only murmured, barely audible, "Don't blame me for everything. I've had my own struggles." That single sentence slipped into the quiet room like a thin crack through glass, a crack that would soon widen, leading them toward a storm far greater than either of them imagined. The waiting room had finally quieted when a nurse rushed out of the ER doors. "Mr. David, Ms. Amy Drive. Richard would like to speak with you." David stood immediately, nerves tightening through his shoulders. Amy rose more slowly, her expression unreadable. Together, they followed the nurse into a small consultation room. "Drive." Richard held a chart in his hand, his face grave. "We received the blood test results. There's a trace amount of a certain substance." David blinked. "A substance? What kind?" "A sedative. It's mild, but it shouldn't be in her system. This wasn't a natural collapse." Amy stiffened for a fraction of a second. "There's no sedative like that in our house. I've never seen anything like that." Her voice was quick, but her eyes betrayed unease. Richard watched her closely, then laid another document on the table. "The nurse found something in the patient's room," he said. A small plastic bag lay on top of the paper, shredded pieces of a medication packet. Some letters were still visible. David felt a cold shiver crawl up his spine. "Amy, have you ever seen this before?" She stepped back slightly, hands curling behind her. "No. I told you, I don't know anything. Anyone could have thrown that away." But the nurse gently shook her head. "No one else entered that room. And the way the package was torn, it doesn't look accidental." Her calm tone made the words even sharper. Then another voice joined them. The insurance agent stepped forward with a tablet. "Doctor, this is from our record. Mrs. Amy contacted us earlier this week. She asked about updating the policy, including changing the beneficiary." Amy inhaled sharply. A small sound, yet loud enough to freeze the room. David turned slowly toward her. "Amy, why did you ask about the insurance?" "It was just something I thought we might need. It wasn't a big deal." "Then why didn't you tell me?" Amy shot back defensively. "Do I have to report every little thing? You're always busy." "I was trying to handle it myself." But her tone trembled, more fear than frustration. "Drive." Richard spoke firmly. "Too many elements point in the same direction. The sedative, the torn package, the insurance change. None of this seems coincidental." The words sank heavily into the air. David felt the ground shift beneath him, suspicion finally taking shape. Amy bit her lip hard, her voice cracking as she whispered, "Why is everyone targeting me?" No one responded, because in that moment, the truth had started aligning, piece by piece, like a puzzle revealing the outline of something dark. The moment they stepped out of the consultation room, David's pace quickened. His jaw was tight, his shoulders tense, and by the time they reached the waiting area, he turned to Amy with a voice that trembled not with anger, but with desperate need for clarity. "Amy, we need to talk." Amy hesitated, gripping the strap of her handbag as if grounding herself. "David, please. I'm overwhelmed too. I didn't expect any of this." She tried to sound calm, but her darting eyes revealed the storm underneath. David inhaled slowly, forcing himself to speak evenly. "We need to know who touched Mom's medication. The doctor and nurse both said this isn't something they can ignore." Amy snapped her head up, irritation flaring. "Why would you even think I had anything to do with that? Do you hear yourself? That's hurtful. I'm just trying to figure it out." "Figure it out? That's just another way of saying you suspect me." Their voices rose, the tension thickening like fog. David kept his tone low, but emotion strained each word. "And the insurance, why did you try to change the beneficiary last week?" Amy's expression froze instantly. "It was just something I thought we might need. You come home late, your work is stressful, I was trying to be prepared. You should have told me." "Do I have to report every single thing to you?" Her voice cracked, half defensive, half frightened. "I handled it because you rarely have time." But David shook his head, no longer able to shield himself from the truth forming in his mind. Amy Mum's condition, the torn medication package, the sedative in her system, none of that feels like coincidence. Amy let out a shaky breath and forced a thin smile. "Maybe someone's trying to set me up. Ever think about that? Because I swear, it wasn't me." She tried sounding confident, but her trembling fingers betrayed her. Just then, Amy Miller. The voice belonged to the insurance agent approaching them again, this time holding additional papers. He spoke quietly, but every syllable cut sharply. We reviewed our logs. You also inquired about a certain medication last week. The words hit David like a physical blow. You asked about medication. His eyes widened, disbelief and pain colliding. Amy froze, her mouth opening but no sound coming out. No, that was I mean. But the agent continued. And for the beneficiary change, you listed the reason as high-risk family care. Silence swallowed the waiting room. David stared at her, voice nearly a whisper. Amy, what were you planning? It wasn't anger. It wasn't even grief. It was the quiet collapse of trust. Amy finally found her voice, barely audible, trembling. I didn't mean anything bad. I just thought it might be necessary. But David knew. Something was very, very wrong. The tension in the waiting area snapped like a wire when the ER alarms suddenly blared. Beep, beep, beep. The rhythm faltered, turning sharp and irregular. A nurse rushed out, her face drained of color. Her condition is dropping. Doctor, we need you now. David felt his heart sink. He sprinted toward the room, barely breathing. Mom. What's happening? His voice shook, and his hands trembled as he grabbed the doorframe. Inside, 3 medical staff moved with frantic urgency. Oxygen saturation falling. Systolic pressure dropping fast. Drive. Richard checked the chart, his tone crisp and commanding. We've got another reaction. Prepare the neutralizer immediately. Amy stood frozen at the doorway. Her eyes widened, her lips pressed tightly together, but no tears formed. David saw that expression and felt something inside him twist painfully. Amy, tell me the truth. You didn't do anything to Mom, right? Please tell me you didn't. His voice was barely holding together. Amy whispered, I didn't do anything. But her tone lacked strength. It sounded like someone trying to convince herself, not others. Richard turned to them briefly. This is the second reaction. This level doesn't appear naturally. His voice lowered even further. This only happens when something is administered intentionally, deliberately. The words struck David like a punch to the chest. Cold, heavy, crushing. Just then, another nurse ran in holding a small bag. Doctor. We found another piece while collecting trash. Same medication package. Inside the bag lay another shredded packet, the writing even clearer than the first. David stepped back, breath shaking. Why are these things coming from her room? His gaze drifted slowly, unwillingly toward Amy. Amy's voice erupted, brittle and sharp. I said it's not me. Why does everyone keep looking at me like that? But fear, not innocence, shook her words. And then, Margaret's monitor screamed. The heart line dipped violently, heart rate dropping. Prepare for CPR. The room exploded into motion. Gloves snapped, carts rolled, voices overlapped. David stood at the doorway, unable to move, choking on panic. Please hold on, Mom. Amy took a step back, her hands clenched tightly, and the look on her face was unmistakable. The look of someone sensing that her hidden truth was collapsing around her. What had been only signs of danger was now rising into a full, inescapable storm. Margaret's vital signs finally began to stabilize after nearly 10 tense minutes. David leaned against the doorway, trying to steady his breath, but his knees continued to shake. Relief washed over him only for a moment, because when he turned, Amy was still standing there, frozen, her expression locked tight. Amy. David's voice was low and cracked with strain. You need to tell me the truth. Why does everything keep pointing back to you? Amy snapped her head up, her eyes blazing with a mixture of anger, fear, and something darker. I told you it's not me. Why do you keep attacking me? She clutched her handbag like a shield, stepping back. David could no longer restrain the turmoil inside him. Amy, the medication package from the room, the sedative in Mom's blood, the insurance change, every single thing leads back to you. How am I supposed to believe that's all coincidence? His voice trembled, but the doubt was solidifying into certainty. Amy inhaled sharply, her voice rising. You always do this. Whenever something goes wrong, you look at me first. Did it ever cross your mind that your mom hurt me? That she made things hard for me? Her shout echoed through the hallway. David shut his eyes for a brief second before opening them again. Amy, my mum never hated you. She might have felt uncomfortable sometimes, but she never disliked you. That's not true. I saw her face. She froze every time I walked into the room. At that moment, Richard emerged. I need both of you to lower your voices. The patient is unstable. His tone was firm, but the tension between them was already burning too intensely. David took a slow, painful breath. Amy, why did you ask about that medication last week? I told you. I was confused about her prescription. Then why hide it? I didn't hide anything, I just didn't mention it. Then the insurance agent returned, his expression stern. And the beneficiary change, you wrote the reason yourself. High-risk family care. Correct. Amy's face went rigid, her voice barely holding together. I didn't mean anything by that. I just thought it might be necessary. Necessary? David's voice shook, not with anger, but with a shattering sense of betrayal. In a situation like this, how can you say that? Amy backed up further toward the wall, her composure slipping. So now I'm a criminal to you. What am I supposed to think? Look at what's happening. A nurse rushed out sharply. Please. The patient is unstable. Keep your voices down. But the line had already been crossed. David looked at her one more time, eyes filled with hurt. Amy, please. Tell me the truth. Right now I don't have a single reason left to trust you. Amy flinched as if struck, then slowly turned her head away. Not in innocence, but in fear of what the truth might expose. The crack between them was no longer a misunderstanding. It had become a full, unavoidable collision. The heart monitor erupted without warning. Beep, 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 beep. The rhythm collapsed, the waveform crashing violently. Nurses scrambled, blood pressure dropping, respiratory pattern unstable. Administer more neutralizer. David stumbled into the room, nearly losing his balance. Mom. Please, please hold on. His voice cracked, overflowing with despair. His fingers trembled as he gripped the edge of the monitor. Amy stood by the doorway, frozen, unmoving, her eyes wide but without a single tear forming. Her handbag had slipped from her hand, lying forgotten on the floor. Drive. Richard barked orders. Defibrillator ready. Charging to 120. Clear. Thump. Margaret's body jolted upward. David covered his face with both hands, sinking to his knees. Mum, please. His eyes glistened with desperation. Then, a nurse rushed in holding a tablet. Doctor. I checked the CCTV. There's something you need to see. The tone in her voice forced the room into stillness. Richard looked at David. David, please step outside with me. It wasn't a request. It was the voice of a man who knew the truth, and knew it would hurt. In the hallway, the nurse pressed play. The footage showed a small gap in the hospital room door. Through it, Amy, holding a medication bottle, quietly switching Margaret's pills. She glanced around, then slipped the altered bottle back in place, and as she stepped out, a faint, unmistakable lift of her lips. David felt his world tilt. No, this can't be real. His hands shook as he held the tablet, breath breaking apart. Behind them, Amy's strained whisper cracked the silence. That's not what it looks like. I didn't mean it's not. But the words collapsed before they formed. Inside the room, Doctor. Pulse returning, vitals stabilizing. A rush of relief washed through David, but it collided with something devastating. He turned slowly toward Amy. There was no anger, no sorrow, just the final, cold certainty of a man who had seen the truth with his own eyes. Drive. Richard stepped into the hallway, the tablet still in his hand. The tension was suffocating, pressing against the walls and every breath taken in the room. David clutched the device, his fingers trembling. This is real? Amy did this. She actually. Amy leaned against the wall, her face drained of color, her lips parted, but her voice barely escaped. I didn't mean that day, I was just. But the sentence shattered before reaching its end. Richard spoke calmly, almost clinically. The CCTV footage cannot be altered. The timestamp, the room angle, the reflection, everything is consistent. The person switching the medication bottle is clearly identified. His tone held no judgment. Yet the truth behind it felt like a blade. David stared back at the screen, the small slit in the door, Amy glancing around, Amy lifting the bottle, Amy switching the pills, Amy slipping out as if nothing happened. Every frame was sharp, undeniable, cold. Why? The word escaped David like a broken breath. Why would you do this, Amy? Why? His eyes were unfocused, his world unraveling. What hurt him wasn't anger. It was the violence of disappointment, the collapse of trust. Finally, Amy lifted her head, her eyes glossy with panic but still dry. I was overwhelmed. I've been taking care of her alone, doing everything alone. I lost control for a moment. Her voice trailed into nothing. David cut her off sharply. So you switch her medication? That's your excuse? No. It wasn't like that. I was just trying to organize things. Your mum has so many prescriptions. I got confused, I swear. Her words tripped over themselves, shaky and frantic. The insurance agent stepped closer. Ms. Amy, last week you asked very specific questions about medication effects, side reactions, and dosage response. Do you recall that? The color drained further from her face. Her hands clenched over her chest. That was just in case I didn't mean. Richard delivered the final blow. Given the lab results and the footage, it is medically clear the sedative was administered intentionally, and the individual handling the medication matches the person in the video. Silence spread like frost. David didn't speak, didn't blink. He simply stared at the woman he loved, and at the truth that had destroyed everything. Finally, after what felt like minutes, he whispered, Amy, you lived with me, you shared my home, and you did this to my mother. His voice trembled, not with anger, but with something far deeper, something breaking. Amy slid down the wall, breath shaking. I was tired, I was desperate, I wasn't thinking, I didn't mean for it to. But intentions no longer mattered. The truth was already carved in light on the screen. Margaret's vitals stabilized just before dawn. The frantic footsteps of nurses softened, and the hallway slowly exhaled the tension that had gripped them for hours. But inside David, the storm had only begun. He stood against the wall, saying nothing. His face looked drained, almost gray, and his hands opened and closed as if trying to hold on to something that had already slipped away. What weighed him down wasn't anger, but the collapse of trust. At the far end of the corridor, hospital security appeared with 2 police officers. Amy's eyes widened instantly. Are they here for me? Her voice wavered, a mix of fear, disbelief, and raw panic. One of the officers stepped forward. We need to ask you some questions based on the evidence collected. The other spoke gently, but the meaning was brutal. You'll need to come with us, Mrs. Miller. Amy shook her head, taking a shaky step toward David. David, you believe me, right? You know I didn't mean anything bad. Her voice cracked not with remorse, but with desperation. David lifted his head slowly. Amy, what am I supposed to believe? He wasn't shouting. His tone wasn't harsh. It was the quiet, painful voice of a man watching something precious break. The CCTV, the medication, the insurance, everything points to you. Amy swallowed hard. I was overwhelmed, I was exhausted taking care of your mother alone. All the time I just wanted a break. Her explanation sounded thin, fragile like paper tearing in the wind. David shook his head softly. I know you were tired, and I should have helped more, but that doesn't justify switching her medication. Nothing does. For the first time, Amy's face fully collapsed. I'm not a monster, I'm not. But David didn't reach for her. He didn't step forward. Something inside him refused to move. A police officer approached her gently. Mrs. Miller, we need to go. Amy's legs shook as she walked down the hallway, her steps uneven, her figure trembling with every movement. Moments later, a nurse approached David. Your mother is stable for now. She'll need monitoring, but she's out of immediate danger. David let out a breath he'd been holding for too long. Thank you so much. He walked back toward his mother's room. Through the small glass window, he saw her resting pale, but safe. Relief finally washed over him, heavy and aching. He turned once more to look down the hallway, but Amy was gone. Only the echo of truth remained, a line dividing who protected life and who endangered it. They had once been a family, but now, they stood on opposite sides of a truth that could never be undone. The first light of dawn seeped slowly through the hospital windows. David sat outside his mother's room, hands clasped tightly, exhaustion weighing on his shoulders. The chaos of the night had finally settled, and though his heart still ached, the knowledge that Margaret had survived brought him a quiet, steady relief. A nurse stepped out of the room. Her consciousness is returning. You may go in now. David rose slowly. His steps were heavy, not from fear anymore, but from everything the night had taken out of him. When he opened the door, Margaret lay with her eyes half open, a faint smile touching her lips as she recognized her son. "Mom, can you hear me?" David's voice was soft, almost trembling. Margaret nodded weakly. "David, are you okay?" Her voice was thin, but sharp with awareness. David swallowed hard. "You don't worry about me, okay? I'm right here. I'm not going anywhere." He reached out and held her hand gently. "I won't let anything like this happen to you again. I promise." Margaret squeezed his hand lightly. "That's enough for me, just knowing you're here." The room carried a silence, not the cold, frightening quiet of uncertainty, but the calm that follows after a violent storm passes. A doctor entered moments later. "Her condition is stable. She'll need monitoring, but she's out of immediate danger." David bowed his head, overwhelmed with relief. "Thank you, really. Thank you." Yet in the midst of that peace, Amy's absence lingered like a faint shadow. She had already been taken away by the officers. No shouting, no final words, just the echo of footsteps disappearing down the hall. David realized something in that moment. Truth always rises. No matter how deeply a lie is hidden, it eventually comes through the cracks. He adjusted the blanket around his mother and whispered, "Mom, from now on, just rest. I'll take care of everything." Margaret opened her eyes again, her voice fragile but warm. "Family means protecting each other. You never forgot that." Her words pierced him gently, comforting, grounding, real. Sunlight spilled across the room, soft and warm, pushing away the long shadow of the night. David took her hand once more, a small smile forming on his face. "Today's a good day, Mom." The lie had collapsed. The truth had stood firm, and in that truth, mother and son finally returned to the quiet life they deserved. Thank you for staying with us until the end. We'll be back with an even better story next time. Your support, subscribes, likes, and notifications means the world to us.